Thank you, everyone, for coming to the top 7 productivity techniques for working at home. I created that title earlier in the week, and it's actually going to be a collection of way more than 7 techniques, but grouped into 7 categories. So yeah, once again, thank you for all attending. So there we go. What you'll learn today, first we'll go over some basics of the core foundations of good productivity. Then we'll talk about strategies for avoiding procrastination, for limiting your distractions, improving your focus, building your momentum, managing your energy, and then end with how and when to plan your day. A little bit about me. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've built 3 businesses, sold 2. I'm currently working on my 4th, Day Optimizer, which I'll tell you about in a minute. I've spent about 20 years working at home, so lots of experience on figuring out how to do this. And my personal mission is to help people live more fulfilling lives by inspiring them to reach their potential. Right now, I am doing that through Day Optimizer and helping people get better at time management. But some of you may know I also have the Strategic Life Tools website for helping you do life planning, and the Lean Decisions website for helping you make better decisions. If you have any questions or feedback on today's webinar, you can send an email to trevor@dayoptimizer.com. Also, if you want a copy of this webinar and the slides afterwards, just shoot me an email and I will send that to you as soon as I get it all prepared. And then finally, if you have questions during this webinar, go ahead and enter them in the chat box and I'll try to address them as we go along or at the end. And there'll also be time at the end for questions. Real quick, a little bit about Day Optimizer, my current business. It is a desktop and mobile web app that helps you create a daily schedule so you can more mindfully plan your day. It introduces this unique 3-step process for building a better daily schedule. It has this concept of a task flow where you can mark tasks done today or done forever, with tasks marked done today, rolling over to the next day. That helps you get dopamine rushes from checking things off your list when you work on them during the day, but allows you not to lose them if you haven't actually finished them. It helps you account for all your time, appointments, tasks, and regular activities. So that way you see everything that takes time of your day. Day Optimizer is a time management application, not a task management application. So it's helping you manage your time with appointments synced from your calendar. And finally, a new feature that just came this month and that actually has dramatically altered how I'm using Day Optimizer is this real-time ETA. So as you decide what you're going to do today, allocate time to everything, Day Optimizer then knows how much time you have allocated for your day, and it can project an end time based upon the current day. And as you mark things done or skip throughout the day, it will update this ETA, this projected end time of when you will finish your day. And that allows you to reprioritize. If you suddenly start seeing, oh, I'm not going to finish my day until like 11 o'clock at night, you can go, okay, well, I'm going to skip these activities and make it a more reasonable day. So that helps you manage your day in real time. Okay, let's jump into it. The basics. First is just maintain your body, right? If your body isn't healthy, rested, good, then it's very hard to be productive. So ensure you're getting a good night's sleep. That's both in time and quantity. There's lots of studies that talk about how lack of sleep makes us perform less effectively. We actually perform as if we're drunk in many cases if we don't get enough sleep, and we don't realize how big of an effect the lack of sleep has on us. So making sure just to put in the hours in the bed are important. Also quality, I'm someone who snores. For other people who snore, I highly recommend the Snore Lab app if you're using iOS. They may have an Android version, but it lets you record your snoring throughout the night and also analyze exactly what type of snoring it is, what factors affect that. Exercise, keep your brain healthy by exercising your body. That keeps your blood flowing. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. but I like to think of exercise in 4 different categories: my cardio, my stretching, my strength training, and my balance. Out of those 4, the one that I've found has the greatest effect on my personal productivity is my cardio. If I skip a couple days going out for a walk or run, I'll notice uh, it builds up, and I'll notice my productivity slipping. So a couple days of just even going out for a 15, 20-minute walk, suddenly my productivity will increase. And finally, managing your hormones and energy by eating the right foods at the right time. So what we put in our body affects our brain. So paying attention to that is important. They recommend to manage your cortisol levels, wait, I think it's like an hour after you wake up before you drink your caffeine. But you can read more about that kind of stuff. But it's definitely important to manage your nutrition. So those are just the basics of productivity. Let's get into some techniques for avoiding procrastination. So I like this concept called a jumpstart. And what a jumpstart is it's something that you do that puts you into this intermediate state that gets you ready to do the task that you really want to do. And here's a couple jump starts that have worked for me, but you might find other jump starts that work for you. So I encourage you to explore different things that might help you jumpstart into tasks. First one for me is prime the pump, where I jump in and I do the first 5 minutes of the task, and I say, I'm only going to spend 5 minutes. So I overcome that whole, oh, I don't feel like in the mood, or like, you only have to do 5 minutes, and then I stop and I do something else. Ideally, that something else is physical, so I don't like unload everything that I just loaded into my brain. And then what happens is it will often create this built-up effect. There's this effect called the Zeigarnik effect, which is that we tend to keep in our brain things that are unfinished. And so it makes it when we switch back into the task, we're much more likely than jump in and start doing it. So that really helps with procrastination. Another one is the next steps, where you write down the next 3 steps for the task. A lot of times when we're procrastinating, it's because we have uncertainty around the task. We don't know what we need to do next. So rather than start the task or sit down and getting ready to start the task, taking out this separate block to say, let me write down what are the 3 next tasks, that can prepare you to then start the task after that. When you're doing that, you might come up with tasks that are not the next one, and I like to throw those into the categories of soon or later. That just kind of like are rough relative categories that say this is next, then this is soon after that, and then that's later down the road. The third jumpstart is dress the part. Put in the clothes that match the task at hand. This kind of just shifts your mindset and your mental landscape into doing that task. Getting dressed professionally for a meeting. I used to do this for sales calls, where I would get all dressed up to make phone sales calls, which sounds silly, but it got me into the mood to do that. Today, I use that a lot for exercise. I'll put on my exercise clothes while I'm working. I'll take a break in the middle of working, take a couple of minutes to put on my exercise clothes, go back and work, but then that makes me more, just puts me in the mindset to then go out for my run or go out for my walk half an hour later. So I like to do that around 5 to 30 minutes before the anticipated start. That helps me avoid procrastinating on my exercise, which I am more likely to do if I don't do that. And then the last one are transition rituals. This is where you develop a set of steps that you do each time before starting. Like a lot of people like to go and make and drink a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and that kind of like shifts them into that mode. But developing these kind of transition rituals that move you from your current state into this intermediate state that then prepares you to do it. Again, that's the point of the jumpstart. Get you into an intermediate state that kind of reduces those barriers and allows you to avoid that procrastination. Next one are like hacking your brain. So a lot of times our brains are just like running with all these different ideas and things or worries, And just spending 5 minutes to write down your current thoughts to empty out your brain can be a great technique to avoid procrastination. It kind of like calms your brain and then lets you be ready to focus on the next task. Um, Time block sprints. So where you take your task and say, I'm going to do this in multiple sprints, and you assign like fixed time blocks for that. So I'm going to do like um, the task in 3 1-hour sprints. And by creating these multiple sprints, we're creating this time limit for each, and it makes it more likely we're going to be focused and more likely to kind of get started on those tasks during those time blocks. If it's going to take me 3 hours for something and allocate 3 hours, it's easier to like go and waste like the first half an hour going on Facebook or just fiddling around the kitchen or something. But if I've set myself an hour, it's much harder to do that. Like it feels like I need to get started. So dividing those tasks into like smaller, multiple sprints. Related to that is creating the deadlines throughout the day for each phase of the task. So if you have clear um, uh, points in the day, clear milestones in your tasks, you can set deadlines for those through the day. So often when I'm creating content, what I'll do is I divide myself into 3 phases. I outline, then I draft, then I edit. And then often there's a published phase after that. And then so I'll create deadlines for each of those phases. So like I need to have my outline done by this time. I need to have my draft done by this time. And then I need to have be edited and published by this time. And then finally, accountability. Announce to a friend or on social media your deadline, or find an accountability partner. That can be incredibly powerful. Um, my friend, my old coach, Steve Robbins, does these things called Get It Done days, where people call to check in throughout the day. And that kind of creates this internal accountability throughout the day. Those strategies like that are great to kind of hack your brain to avoid that procrastination. Next is limiting distractions. So a key thing you want to do is manage your interruptions. If you are living in a household with someone else or other people, that can be difficult. People are coming in, like need to ask you questions or whatnot. So one of the strategies that I use is the fly the focus flag strategy. And what this is a visible symbol to indicate when you're in a focused state. Now, you may not use this the entire time you're working, but when you're in that kind of deep work state, when you're in that focus state where the interruptions are going to really divert you, you use this to say, please don't interrupt me, please don't ask me a question. Especially when we're doing a lot of like mental work, we'll have everything loaded in our brain. If someone comes and asks us a question, even for 30 seconds, it can take us 10, 20 minutes to recover from that. So a friend of mine whose wife worked at home and he worked at home developed this strategy where he would wear bunny ears, or they would both wear bunny ears when they were in a focus state. So they get these cheap bunny ears. I don't know if they got them from Amazon or where they got them, but they're a very visible thing to see. They go, oh, this person's in a focused state. The other thing is they're kind of unusual. So like you look over and you see bunny ears, it kind of shocks you, and you're like, oh, I'm not supposed to ask them a question. Headphones can work for that, but a lot of times nowadays people are wearing such small headphones you won't even see them. If you've got a door, you can close the door. That works well. But sometimes you can also then tie a bandana around the door to say like I'm in a focus state. That works well if you always have your office door closed, and sometimes you want to allow interruptions and sometimes you don't. Then putting some additional do not disturb symbol on the end of the door. Next is to don't throw boomerangs. So I think a lot of times we do things without thinking about the downstream consequences of what we're doing. So if you send someone a text, they are probably going to respond. and they're going to respond in some sort of time frame that is most likely within the next couple hours. Now, if they always respond right away and you can like quickly send the text, that's great. But sometimes we don't anticipate this, and so we reply to a text, or we start a text, or we send out an email. We make a phone call and leave a message, and now suddenly we've created this boomerang that's going to come back and interrupt us when we're in our flow later in our day. So just being aware of when we're doing that, and maybe avoiding throwing out those boomerangs, avoiding starting those conversations, leaving those messages until it's at a point of our day when we can manage those. And we'll get into later on our circadian rhythms and when during the day we can handle interruptions and when it's best to limit interruptions. And then the final thing is, of course, turn off notifications. We should all know that there's a do not disturb mode on your phone. There's also one on your computer, or at least on a Mac. I'm not sure on Windows, but if you go to the notification bar and kind of scroll up, it will then just suddenly appear where there's a do not disturb button, just like on your phone, that will turn off all notifications. So do that when you're in a focused state. Next is creating mindfulness around what your distractions are. So a key thing is identifying your triggers. So start a trigger log. Every time you get distracted, write down what distracted you. And then over time, you'll start to see patterns. And then once you see patterns, you can start to disrupt those patterns. Another one is setting a checkpoint. So setting a timer to catch yourself. This is especially good to catch yourself from going down rabbit holes. A lot of times when we do online research, and what we think is going to take like half an hour suddenly goes into like 2 or 3 hours, or we just get into a task that we don't realize how much time we're spending on it. Like I'll often do that with like outlining or drafting. I'll say like, okay, I only want to spend an hour on this task, and then I get carried away. By setting the timer, it creates this kind of mindfulness and know when you're kind of getting distracted. A great little tool for that is there's this little plastic cube called a time cube. It's this little cube that you can just turn on its side, and it has different numbers. The one I have says 5, 15, 30, and 60 minutes, and you just flip it over to a number, and then it starts a countdown timer. So it's very quick to do that. But you can also use your phone for that as well. And then the last one for mindfulness is creating written rules. Deciding upfront what are going to be your rules on how you don't get distracted, and then putting them where you see them regularly. So one of my rules that has become very effective for me is no Facebook before 5 p.m. And this allows me to still engage on social media, connect with my friends through Facebook, but by saying no Facebook before 5 p.m., that prevents me from using Facebook as a distraction through the day. And it's a very clear rule because I've set a time for when I'm allowed to use Facebook. So it's very clear when I'm breaking that rule. So it makes it much harder to justify to myself, oh, I'm going to break the rule. Now, I do sometimes will break that rule for specific social media when I'm working that way. We'll get into some strategies later on around if you need to use social media for work, how you can use that without getting distracted. And the next one is to chain yourself. So this is where you create Ulysses packs or you create forced limitations on yourself. So there's built-in tools to many operating systems these days that will help you limit your screen time or block you entirely. So screen time on Mac and iOS will keep track of how much time you're running on applications, but you can also limit and set time limits for different applications. At least on the Mac, I think you can also set time limits for specific websites if you're using Safari. Digital well-being on Android is very similar. And then on Windows, I think you just kind of have to use parental controls or a third-party app. Speaking of third-party apps, you can install software. So there's a plugin on Chrome called Stay Focused that can help you limit your time on distracting sites. There's also another service / app called Freedom. If you go to freedom.to, they have a app that works on Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android that can help you limit the time you spend on various apps and websites. So use those tools to kind of create boxes around yourself. Uninstalling apps is always a great thing. Is just uninstall the app on your phone and use the website when you need it, or use another device entirely. I recently did that again with Facebook, and it's been wonderful to only use Facebook on my laptop, and then if I need to use it on the phone, I can use the website, but mostly use it on the laptop. The other thing related to that is using the specific apps that are geared toward specific functionality. So Facebook, for instance, has Messenger and Local. So Local will let you see all your events in Facebook that you've people have sent you invites to or you've said going to, but then you don't have to see your feed. Messenger lets you communicate without seeing your feed. So again, these are ways to limit your distraction. And then related to that is on the web is creating deep bookmarks. So avoid the homepage for these distracting sites. Like Twitter, Facebook, all these homepages are designed to distract you. They're designed to draw you in and engage you. So if you want to avoid getting distracted, don't go to the homepage. Like sometimes you need to use Facebook or Twitter or some other sites for work. Bookmark the specific features you need. So bookmark facebook.com/messages, facebook.com/groups. By bookmarking these specific pages, you can avoid that distracting feed. If you need to make posts, just bookmark your own personal page, your own profile page, and then you can make posts from there. If you go to facebook.com, they'll show you all those distracting feeds. Likewise with Twitter, is you can actually bookmark the tweet page and just go straight to that tweet page to do that. Okay. Next one is improve focus. Hold a second. So Daniel Pink in his book When summarizes the research around circadian rhythms in this way. He defines 3 different energy phases that we all go through throughout the day that relate to how well we focus. There's a peak, there's a trough, and there's a recovery. So the peak is when our focus and our mental acuity is highest. This is best for analytical work and for detail-oriented type work. The trough is when we start having that brain fog and low energy, and that's best for administrative and routine tasks where you don't have to like think too deeply. And then there's this recovery phase where we regain some energy. What happens there is we're not as focused or detail-oriented as during the peak. Our brains work a little bit more laterally, so that time is great for tasks that require creativity and flashes of insight. Okay, so your chronotype, different people have different chronotypes. So if you're a morning person, say you go to bed around like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night, and you're getting up at like 5, 6 a.m., you're a lark, you will peak more in the early-ish morning. You'll have your trough around midday and then your recovery around mid-afternoon. If you're the opposite, like myself, you're a night owl, you'll be sluggish in the morning. You'll have your recovery more in the morning. You'll have your trough in the afternoon, and then you'll peak in the evening, sometimes even late evening. And then everyone else, which is most people, they're what Daniel Pink calls third birds. They peak in the morning later than the larks, say maybe like around 9, 10, 11. They trough in their early afternoon, and then the recovery phase is in the late afternoon. So figure out what your chronotype is to understand how your energy moves throughout the day, and there'll always be adjustments here. But thinking through those 3 phases lets us then match our tasks to their time. So analytical tasks you want to do during your peak times. Now, if you can, also try to make sure those are the times you're going to have the fewest interruptions, because you're going to be the most focused during that time, and that is going to be one of your most productive times for deep analytical work, like work that has one right answer that you're trying to get to. During your trough times, do administrative and routine work. Do the work that, like checking the email and paying the bills and things that you don't need to think too much about, that you can kind of do when you're like still in a brain fog. That's also a great time for interruptions, because usually you don't need to like keep track of too much at that time. So if someone interrupts you, it's not a big deal. And then finally, do your creative work during your recovery time. I like to try to make sure I'm not having any upcoming meetings or other daily deadlines, because a lot of times getting into the creative work creates this kind of flow when you want to kind of explore a little bit. And if you have an upcoming like meeting or deadline, it can sometimes short circuit that creativity. And then I also put in the relationship. I think it's important to set aside time in our day to manage our relationships. And those can be both personal and professional relationships. But especially if you're working at home and you have other people in your household, taking breaks throughout the day to explicitly step away and connect and be present with the other people in your household can be very powerful. And just making sure that you're doing it in a kind of deliberate fashion and not being too rushed about that. Okay. The next way to improve your focus is to alter your physiology. Everyone probably knows about meditation. That is a very valuable thing. You can train your brain with only 5 or 10 minutes a day. There's some great apps for that. Calm and Headspace. I've recently been using an app called Waking Up, which gives you a 50-day course to teach you many of the different disciplines of meditation, because they're not just one. We often focus on your breath. One is what we learn first, but there's many different types of meditation. So that's a great app. I would say don't worry if you're not doing it well. Like even if all you do is for 5 minutes each day, sit there and stop and focus and try to focus on your breath and let all the thoughts intrude. Even that is having an effect. It may not feel like it's having an effect, but if you do that for like a week or two and then you stop doing it, you'll notice that increased focus that comes from doing that just 5 minutes a day. The next one is binaural beats, and this is one that not everyone has heard about. But what a binaural beat is when you play a slightly different frequency into each ear. So you need to use these using headphones, and it can actually entrain our brainwave into certain frequencies. So it can put you into a focused state or a meditative state or a relaxed state using just audio. So one of the apps that has built a whole business around this is Brain FM. They use binaural beats as well as other techniques to bring you into a focused state, a sleep state, a relaxed state, or a meditative state. I use it primarily for the focus state, and for me, it really does work. It doesn't work for everyone, but for the people it works for, it works pretty well, I think. The other app I use on my phone, which is iOS only, I think Brain FM is everywhere. It's the web, it's iOS, all that, is Brainwave, and that lets you create these different programs for different things. So the one I use the most for that is a power nap, where it will actually bring my brain down into a calm, relaxed kind of sleep state where I can nap, and then at the end of the time, it wakes me back up and brings me back into a focus state, all just using the audio on the headphones. So that is a great thing to alter your psychology and improve your focus throughout the day. The last one is brain fuel. So one of the things we know from decision science is that we get decision fatigue from doing different things throughout the day, making all these decisions. That makes us more likely to create poor decisions. One of the key ways to recover from that is to eat. So they've done some studies of judges. Judges tend to make the most fair rulings early in the morning and right after lunch when they are not suffering from decision fatigue. So think about when you're doing stuff during the day, when you need to have that focus, and using food as a way to do that. I know some people will also dip when they eat like a lunch, and you can play with what foods are going to give you the boost or give you the dip. And then finally, our brains run on glucose. So I will often say to use this quick hack that if you need that quick burst of brain energy, is to eat some sugar. It's not good to eat sugar in general, but like, drink a glass of orange juice or eat a quick chocolate bar, something like that. It gives your brain that little boost of glucose to keep going. So let's talk about building momentum. So what we've done is at this point in time, we have kind of gotten rid of procrastination, eliminated some of our distractions, improved our focus, but now we need to kind of like build some momentum. So I like to create 3 lists. The first one is a quick win list. These are tasks that can be done quickly, but then they feel like accomplishments. And what it allows you to do is very rapidly start checking things off a list. By checking them off, you're getting this nice dopamine rush of accomplishment, which also then feeds into making you more focused and motivated. Forget the exact brain science, but dopamine's tied into those together. So I'll use this to kind of get started on tasks and kind of build up some speed. So I like to talk about it as if you are driving in a car. You don't go from 0 to 60 miles an hour right away. You kind of press on the gas pedal and you increase it. So if you think about creating a quick win list of, here's some 5-minute tasks that I can get done that will feel like accomplishments. Here's some 15-minute tasks. Here's like 1 or 2 half-an-hour tasks. And so when you need to build some momentum, you do 1 or 2 5-minute tasks, now jump to 15-minute tasks and kind of speed up. And now suddenly you've got this like momentum that then carries throughout the rest of your day. So that's like a great technique. So like develop quick win lists early before you need them, and then you can run through them. There's also ways to create quick win templates. I wrote about this on our blog. If you go to dayoptimizer.com/blog, there'll be one that's talking about how to build momentum. And you can create templates like network with one person, post one thing on social media, something like that. And by creating these templates, you can use those as quick wins to kind of build that momentum. The next one is creating an eliminate drag list. And what this does is, what you want to do is collect all the annoyances that are slowing you down. So say you're going out of the basement and you see that burnout light bulb. Well, it's not a high priority to replace the light bulb. Say like you're in your flow, you're going to go get your wash, like you don't want to interrupt that. But every single time you go and see it, it's this little ding. So there's all these kind of things around that kind of are just these minor annoyances that aren't big enough to kind of work on and remove, but reduce our energy. And sometimes they're large things. So just identifying, writing them down on the list to begin with, that allows you to then go and tackle them at a time during all at once. So scheduling a day, like a tune-up day once a month to eliminate all your drag can suddenly help you perform way more efficiently and be more productive. The other thing you can use your tune-up day for is to increase your velocity. So these are things that would amplify your effectiveness and impact. Similar to the drag, they're often things that like aren't really super high priority, but would really help. So think about like automation and creating systems, organizing, pruning things. These are all things that like increase your velocity. And so spending time to work to implement them, again, just even if it's once a month, you just create a tune-up day where all you do is you eliminate drag and you increase your velocity. In the meantime, create the list so that you know during your tune-up day what those things are going to be. The next thing on building momentum, I always like to use the phrase move first, improve later. Too many of us wait for perfection to get started. We want this certainty, this complete plan. But the problem with that is we often we don't know what we don't know. So until we get started and actually start working in an area, we don't know what we need to, like what that plan should be. So I've developed this 3-step process for kind of building momentum. The first is to start haphazard, like just get started with anything. That helps me kind of like get the rush of accomplishment. Hey, I'm doing some stuff here. It also helps you learn the shape of the problem. You start seeing, oh, these are the issues I'm going to run into. These are some of the advantages of that. Once you kind of have that, where you're just in it, doing it, you can start then developing a rhythm, which is to build this consistency into this regular cadence. And that also helps reduce the cognitive load of starting. So if I know like I'm going to publish a blog post every Thursday now I don't need to, now I just know that's what I need to do. So it helps me keep that momentum going. And then finally, once you have, you've got some accomplishments under your belt, you understand the shape of the problem or the shape of the project you're working in, and you've kind of developed this rhythm, and then you know that you have the discipline to keep it going, that's the time to then start building long-term strategies and goals. Now you kind of understand, you might be able to see the path forward much more clear than you could before you even started, and you know where you're going. So just don't do it too early. Use the strategy to amplify your momentum once you have the other things down. The last building momentum is to celebrate your wins. So create an accomplishment log, that track your accomplishments that create long-term value and impact. So I do this using a Google spreadsheet. So I can just keep a browser tab open, and I'll just record the date. I've got some little categories like, did I create a blog post? Did I create a piece of content? What it was. I'll also track the impact from that. So like, for instance, I use Help a Reporter Out to connect with reporters and stuff like that. If something gets published, then I'll put a link into there and note that, hey, my response actually was helpful there. But just keeping track of your accomplishments that kind of create that long-term value and impact can be really useful for building that momentum. Creating rewards for your different milestones. Don't wait until the end of the project to reward yourself. Like give yourself intermediate rewards, and that's that kind of carrot part of building the momentum. And then this isn't really a celebrate win, but it's another tip, is preparing your space. Gather everything you need before you begin so you don't have to stop. So I've recently been doing this, for instance, with water. I fill up a huge pitcher of water so I don't need to constantly go back out into the kitchen to refill my water glass throughout the day. And that avoids like me going to the kitchen, which then suddenly like I might get interrupted or get in a conversation with my girlfriend, or like I might get distracted. I might decide to check the fridge and eat. By keeping the water there in my office, I'm able to kind of keep my momentum going. So having everything that I'm going to need during that project all at once. So preparing that space in advance can help you create your momentum. Number 6, managing your energy. So we talked a little bit about the circadian rhythm throughout the day, but we also have to manage other parts of the energy. First one is reducing stress. So take breaks, but break before you think you need it, right? So a lot of times what we do is we wait until we're almost at burnout or almost exhausted to take the break. And then it's a little too late because it's hard to regain momentum from a stop. It's better to take a break think of it like when you're about a quarter tank full. So, if you think about your energy like a gas tank, you want to go down to a quarter tank, take your break to kind of recharge and then go from there. Because we can't rely on because if we wait until our bodies are totally exhausted and we're feeling it to take the break, it's too late. I often recommend people set a timer to remember. So I make sure that I never work more than 90 minutes at a stretch, or I try not to work more than 90 minutes of stretch. I'll often do even shorter sprints and then take breaks. Even 60-second helps. So even if it's just getting up for a minute, walking around your office, and then sitting back down, that kind of resets your body. So some other ways to reduce some stress is breathing deeply. So you probably know deep breaths into the belly, but there are many different techniques specific to help you reduce stress. There's the box breathing technique, which is breathing in for 4 counts, holding for 4 counts, breathing out for 4 counts, and holding for 4 counts. There's a 4-7-8. You breathe in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. Alternate nostril breathing, bellows breathing. Just Google breathing techniques. A lot of times we think, oh, breath is just something we do. We don't think about that there's actually specific techniques and different breathing patterns alter our physiology in different ways. So learning some of those breathing patterns, I'd always heard, and I try to do a little bit, try to find the specific research about this for this presentation, but that you should be breathing in through your nose and then breathing out through your mouth, and taking a longer exhale will activate the parasympathetic nervous system and help you relax more and reduce stress. But read up on different breathing techniques. We already talked about meditation, letting your worries go for a while and learning to calm your brain. Again, it doesn't work immediately. And in fact, it's still like, it's not like when I sit down to meditate that like my brain is suddenly perfectly clear, but it creates this just calming effect that kind of resets a little bit. And then finally, move your body, stretch, walk, take a dance break. Moving your body releases endorphins and is known to improve your mood. So just get up and move. There's a lot of great research from, there's a guy, Peter Lovat, Dr. Dance, who talks all about the benefits of dance. And he gives you lots of little dance moves that you can do anywhere. So, but yeah, take a walk, take a dance break, stretch to reduce your stress. Okay, the last one is stop doing and planning. So first off, a lot of times what we do is we get so deep in our work, we forget to like lift up our head and kind of look where we're going to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. So that is the point of this whole section, is that by doing planning, you may or may not actually follow the plan, but there's value in the plan itself, in the planning process, that helps you ensure that you're working in the right direction and you've got some sort of ideas on how to approach that. So Day Optimizer is, again, a web and a desktop and mobile web app that helps you create a daily schedule. So let me just talk about daily schedules, and we'll get into weekly after that. Why schedule your day? So first is implementation intentions. And also, let me back up. This applies whether you're using Day Optimizer or you're using a day planner, or I used to do this technique with 2 index cards. Scheduling your day has lots of benefits. So implementation intentions. Research says that if you use an implementation intention, you're far more likely to accomplish your goals. So what is an implementation intention? It's a if this, then that. When this condition occurs, then I do this. And I decide that up front. So what you're doing when you're scheduling your day is you're creating a whole series of implementation intentions. For each task, you're saying, at this time, I will do this. And that just makes you more likely to actually do the task. So it works, one of the ways it works, start times, they're an objective trigger to start. So if at the beginning of my day, I decided to start a task at 10 a.m. and it's 10 a.m., then it's hard to say I'm not supposed to start that task. So it kind of nudges you into action. It creates this moment of mindfulness that says, hey, you should be doing this right now. You said you were going to do this. The end times, it creates this checkpoint to decide what your most important task for the day is. So I often tell people when they schedule their day, that it's not supposed to be some perfect schedule you follow exactly. It's the planning process of scheduling your day is to help you reason about time and to make more effective prioritization decisions throughout your day on what you should be working on. So you might be working on a task and you reach the end of your time. That is not a cue to say, let me stop working immediately. It's a cue to say, here's a checkpoint. Let me ask myself, is the task I'm working on the most important thing I should be working on today? If so, push back some of your other things and keep working on it. But if not, well, you just got your nice little checkpoint. Here's your end time. You need to wrap that up so you can move on to the next task. So both start times and end times create these moments of mindfulness throughout our day that help us kind of be aware of how we're spending our time so we can use our time more effectively. And then the last thing that creating a schedule does is it creates this process of implicit prioritization. This helps you understand where your time goes and make decisions on what to do and what to skip. If you block out all your day, there'll be things that won't fit in your day. Most of us are time optimists. Most of us think that we can get way more done in our day than we actually can. When you're actually forced to actually block that out and put that into a schedule, suddenly, like, you have all these things that didn't fit into that schedule, and now you need to decide which actually goes into your schedule. So it creates this prioritization process that is very visceral. Okay, so the process that I recommend for scheduling your day, this is the schedule to-dos process that Day Optimizer is based on, but you can do this on paper as well. First, brainstorm everything you want to do and commit to what you want to tackle today. So create that commitment, but get everything you need to do. That includes all your daily tasks, all your appointments, as well as activities like lunch, exercise, meditation, everything that takes up time in your day, write it down. Then decide how much time you're going to spend on every to-do today. Now that may or may not be how long it takes the task to get done. But if you're going to work on something over several days, you might allocate an hour today to it. And then finally, schedule everything into a specific time slot, and then remove the things that don't fit. And that, again, forces you to prioritize on what's most important. So you're focusing on the important things to be more productive. And then finally, evaluate your progress, and update your plan throughout the day. So as very few people's days go according to plan, and when things don't go according to plan, you need to then make the decision, what are the important things to work on today? So reevaluating your plan throughout the day helps you make those adjustments. So you're doing your daily plan. It's important to also do weekly reviews. So review the past week, what went well, what didn't. Make sure you celebrate what you accomplished. My girlfriend has this thing called a Sunday Summit, where she will review the past week and create a plan for the next week. Next week, decide what your major priorities are for the week, potentially what days to do them on, and to get a sense of how your week is going to flow. And then probably the most important is to do regular reviews of your goals and strategies. Review your current path, explore alternate paths, and decide the best way forward to reach your goals. A lot of times, the right way or the best way to reach our goals, when we start out, it changes as we learn stuff, as the situation and environment changes. And we often don't evaluate frequently enough our path to say, hey, maybe I should be approaching this from a different perspective. So I always recommend people take time out of the week to do this stop doing plan process. If you're running a business, I recommend at least an hour a week. Just sit at the computer, even if in the beginning you're just staring at it and can't think of anything. But setting aside an hour a week, each week, to just stop doing and plan will suddenly give you a lot more insight into what you should be doing, and give you a time to step back from the doing to kind of reevaluate and go, oh, maybe I should approach this from a different perspective because the situation has changed. So that's the end of the presentation. If anyone has any questions, you can enter them in the chat box, and I'll do my best to answer them. If you want a copy of the webinar, email me at trevor@dayoptimizer.com, or just put your email in the chat box. You can send that to me directly, or um, yeah, it's probably best to send that to me directly in the chat box. And I will send you a copy of the recording, the webinar, and the slides. If you are interested in registering for Day Optimizer, you can do a 14-day trial by going to dayoptimizer.com and clicking on the free trial button. That will put you into the free trial page. Right now I'm doing, you don't get immediate access. I am bringing people through onboarding to help them understand how to best use the application and configure it for them. So right now I'm doing both one-on-one onboardings and group onboardings. So the next group onboarding is going to be Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time. I think there's also another one on Wednesday as well. So just go and check that out. So thank you guys all for attending, and I hope you have a productive time working from home.